I never thought I'd end up in a battle with a homeowners association over a building I actually own, but here we are. This all started when I got a letter taped to my door, covered in bold words like violation and non-compliance. It was from the local HOA president, Karen Yes. Her real name, and she wasn't too happy with what she called unauthorized use of the clubhouse. Only thing is, she didn't realize I own the clubhouse. And here's the kicker, they've been paying me monthly rent for years to use it for their meetings. Now, I try to stay out of drama. I like peace and quiet. But when someone shows up, acting like they run the place, telling me what I can and can't do on my own property, that's a different story. Karen was new to the neighborhood and apparently didn't bother checking any facts before coming at me like she was queen of the block. She accused me of breaking HOA rules by storing equipment in my own building. She even threatened fines for using a space they lease from me. It gets better. She called an emergency meeting. I found out through a neighbor who overheard her loudly complaining in the parking lot. Karen wanted to make an example out of me, thinking I was just another resident who could be pressured into line. But she didn't know the history behind that clubhouse or the contract her HOA signs every single year. I decided not to say anything at first. I wanted to see just how far she'd take it. And let me tell you, she went all in. Notices, emails, even trying to get other neighbors to back her up. But the truth was about to hit her harder than she expected. Let's just say the next meeting didn't go how she planned, and that's when things started to unravel for her. So, here's a little background that Karen clearly didn't bother looking into. That so-called clubhouse she was trying to control. It used to be a private event space my dad built back in the day. When the neighborhood started growing and the HOA was formed, they didn't have a place to host meetings or gatherings. So my family offered the space for a fee, of course. A lease was signed, rent was agreed on, and every HOA board since then has paid monthly to use the place. It's all in writing, it's all legal, and the best part? I never actually joined the HOA. I own the land, I own the building, but I'm not under their authority. Karen, though, she assumed everything inside the community lines belonged to them, and instead of asking questions or even introducing herself like a normal person, she came in swinging, clipboard in hand, quoting rulebooks and acting like I was the problem. I played it cool at first. I wanted to see how far she'd take it without ever doing her homework. Word started getting around fast. Some neighbors took her side because, well, she was loud and persistent. Others, especially the longtime residents, knew something didn't add up. They remembered my dad, remembered the old days, and knew that clubhouse wasn't part of the HOA's property. But Karen kept pushing, sent out flyers claiming I was interfering with HOA operations. She even called a vote to revoke access to a building they don't own. It was wild. Then she made the mistake of leaving a not-so-nice voicemail on my phone, basically threatening legal action if I didn't comply immediately. That's when I decided it was time to pull out the paperwork. But instead of confronting her directly, I sent a friendly email to the HOA board with copies of the lease, payment records, and property deed attached. That's when the silence started. Days passed. No emails, no calls. Karen went quiet, but I knew something was coming. I just didn't expect what happened next, or how far she'd go to try and save face. A few days after I sent that email, things got strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. You could feel the tension like heavy air. No more notices. No more knock on my door from Karen. But I wasn't stupid. I knew she was regrouping. And sure enough, the calm didn't last long. A neighbor I'm friendly with stopped me during a morning walk and said, "Hey, you should know Karen's been going door to door, telling people you're trying to take the clubhouse away from the community." That was her new angle. since she couldn't win the rulebook war. She started twisting the story, claiming I was threatening their community space and planning to shut it down. It was laughable, honestly. I've never once restricted access or changed the terms of the lease, but now she was painting me as the villain. She was using fear to turn people against me. Some neighbors started acting weird. One even crossed the street to avoid saying hi. Another one left a note on my windshield about how selfish behavior ruins good neighborhoods. I could have just sent out my own flyer with the facts, but I wanted to see how deep Karen would dig herself. And man, she went deep. Turns out she'd been pressuring the rest of the HOA board to rewrite the lease without my involvement. She even suggested they find a legal loophole to terminate the agreement. But again, it's private property. Their payments go directly into a separate business account I manage. Their events are allowed because I allow them. And now, she was trying to move behind closed doors to cut me out completely. I started hearing whispers about a community vote to remove me from oversight. Oversight of what, though? I never had any official HOA role to begin with. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. Karen didn't just want to enforce guidelines. She wanted power. And I had something she didn't leverage. But even then, I didn't expect what she'd try next. Let's just say, it wasn't just about paperwork anymore. Everything hit a boiling point the day I saw a group of HOA members, Karen, leading the charge, gathered outside the clubhouse with a locksmith. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, as they pointed at the doors like they were planning some kind of tactical mission. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But nope, they were actually trying to change the locks on my building. That's when it all became crystal clear. Karen wasn't just trying to play politics anymore. She was going for a full-on takeover. I walked over calmly, heart pounding but trying not to show it. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, loud enough for the group to hear. Karen spun around, acting surprised to see me. "We're upgrading the locks for security reasons," she said, like that made any kind of sense. "This building is used by the HOA and needs to be properly managed." I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just smiled and asked, "You got paperwork for that?" She didn't. Of course she didn't. But she wasn't backing down either. The locksmith, clearly uncomfortable, stepped away and said he'd need written permission from the property owner. Karen turned red. The rest of the group started whispering. I could feel the cracks forming. But here's the thing: while all of this was going down, I'd started hearing from a few board members privately. They weren't thrilled with how Karen was handling things. One even admitted they had no idea the HOA didn't own the clubhouse until I sent that email. Turns out, Karen had been keeping certain details off the record during board meetings. She was rewriting the narrative in real time. I knew I had leverage, but I also knew people were confused. And Karen was banking on that confusion to carry her forward. She scheduled an emergency community vote for that weekend, trying to push through changes before the truth fully surfaced. I had one shot to show everyone exactly what was going on, and trust me, I was ready. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened at that vote. The day of the vote came faster than I expected. The HOA set up chairs outside the clubhouse, like it was some big town hall, complete with clipboards, bottled water, and Karen front and center in her usual blazer. I stood off to the side, quiet, just watching. People were chatting, some looking unsure, others fully sold on whatever story Karen had been feeding them all week. But I wasn't just there to watch. I brought copies of the lease agreement, tax records, and even photos of the original deed with my dad's name on it. I wasn't going to make a scene, unless I had to. Just as things were about to start, one of the board members I'd spoken to earlier pulled me aside. She looked nervous. "Listen," she whispered. "Karen added something else to the agenda, something she didn't mention to the rest of us until last night." That's when I found out the twist. Karen had filed a motion not just to vote on managing the clubhouse, but to use HOA funds to begin legal proceedings to claim it under something called adverse community possession. I'd never even heard of it. Basically, she was trying to argue that because the HOA had used the building for so many years, it somehow belonged to them. It was absurd and totally false, but it sounded official enough to confuse people. And that's when the stakes really changed. This wasn't just about who had a key or who could hold meetings. Karen was now trying to legally take over private property. Property that had been in my family for decades. And the scary part, some people were starting to believe her. That twist of words, that stretch of logic hit was just believable enough. To muddy the water, I knew I had to act fast. But right before I stepped forward to speak, someone else stood up. Not me, not a board member. It was an older man who'd lived in the neighborhood for years, and what he said completely shifted the energy in that crowd. What he revealed. Let's just say, even Karen didn't see that coming. The crowd went quiet as the older man stood. His name was Mr. Jenkins, one of the original residents of the neighborhood, and someone everyone respected. He didn't raise his voice, but his words cut through the tension like a knife. Before you all vote on anything,